Hello, this is I Do Damage and welcome back to the channel. In this last Epoch video, I want to talk to you about the current state of the game and if I think it's worth jumping in now or continuing to wait. Last Epoch is currently in early access on Steam. It has been in early access since 2019. And actually, if you go back on the YouTube channel here, I've done a state of the game video in 2019, 2020, and now we're doing it in 2021. It's crazy to think it's been that long, isn't it? Last Epoch does not have a set release date. If I had to guess, sometime in 2022 or 2023, that is pure speculation. And the reason I say that is currently Last Epoch is a single player action RPG hack and slash looter, and there's no multiplayer as of right now. They do a monthly update talking about multiplayer and kind of how they're progressing with multiplayer, but as it is right now, it still does not exist yet in the game after 2 years. So I'm not holding my breath. I think they had said that we should have multiplayer by 2021. Getting pretty close to the end of the year. So yeah, I'm not holding my breath. We'll have to see when they add it. But this is the thing, and this is the real fact of the matter about multiplayer, is every time that I come back for a Last Epoch update, the quality of the game has improved drastically. They went from having 10 staff members to now having 50 staff members, and it shows. The quality of the game is just improving with every single patch. And what that is telling me is they're taking this seriously, and they will put in the effort, and they will provide the quality that we expect from them. I know we all want multiplayer at the end of the day, but honestly, I don't want another just rushed out thing just to, please to the numbers. I really hope they take their time with multiplayer. But enough about that. Let's go ahead and talk about Last Epoch, current state of the game in 2021. Currently in Last Epoch, there are 5 different playable classes that have been released. With each class, there are 3 different masteries or specializations that you can choose from. The 5 base classes are Mage, Primalist, Sentinel, Acolyte, and Rogue. As I mentioned, each of those have its own mastery. I'll go ahead and pop the wheel up here for you and you can see it. The only ones that are not in the game yet that I'm aware of is Rune Master, Warlock, and Falconeer. All the other masteries, I believe, are in the game. If you're an action RPG fan, you really would love Last Epoch. And if you haven't had the chance to play Last Epoch yet, I'm really sorry to hear that. This game is amazing, and you are missing out. I know people argue that, well, I'm waiting for multiplayer. I want a fully released game. I'm telling you right now, the story alone is worth it for at least one playthrough, just to see what this game has to offer. And I'm not saying the story is great by any means, and there's so much in Last Epoch to do and talk about, but I really want to keep this video just focused on the things that I absolutely love about the game. The number one thing, and if I was talking to anybody, if you and I were hanging out and I were to talk to you about Last Epoch, the reason I would recommend picking up this game is honestly for the character customization. Now, I'm not talking about, the boob slider, the hair color, the facial hair, and cosmetics of hair character looks. That does not exist currently in Last Epoch. Every class has its own base model, and that's just standard. When I'm talking about character customization, I'm specifically talking about skill trees and how you can customize your own gameplay for your character. There's so much when it comes to theory crafting and build planning, and I would argue this is one of the strongest points of the game is that theory crafting. When I talk about my playtime, a lot of that playtime is also I'm adding in the time that I've spent planning out my build and thinking of different build ideas and how to make my current build work. Because when you very first make your character, for example, I'm currently playing a Primalist. And when I started the Primalist, I knew I wanted to do a totem build, but I really didn't know, I kind of have an idea of what skills I wanted to use. And if you can follow along on the streams, and the replays are up fully timestamped, by the way, you can see the progression of the build just change as I mold and adapt to different items that I find because of different affixes, perusing all the different skill trees, the passives, and how it all ties together, and really trying to make that build work as I progress through the campaign and into the end game. But don't just take my word for it. Let me go ahead and show you what all you can do in terms of customizing your own character and gameplay. First of all, and the biggest point to drive home here is every skill in the game can be leveled up to level 20, and every skill has its very own skill tree that you can assign points to. Each skill, so you can get 20 skill points, and then you can get gear. You can get a few extra points beyond 20 to put onto your skill tree as well through gear. We're not going to cover that in this video, but that would take up affixes on your gear that you could probably use on other things. But anyway, that's all build dependent. But on a fundamental level, you have 20 skill points in each skill tree to spend. And every class has loads of different skills to choose from melee to range, minions, companions, the totems that I mentioned earlier. You have so many different types of spells, and all of it, there's so many options. There's so many options. And what's really crazy about all this is you only have 5 skill slots. So out of all these skills, you can only pick 5 skills to use. So there's a lot of hard choices in this game, and it really is rewarding to know that you've made maybe the right choice and that you can actually take down that final boss and start working on that end game. It's just so awesome with how many options there are and how your choices are so important in this game. So you have your skill trees. Each skill has its own skill tree, and you have 20 points to put in there. Next, we have passives. Every class has its very own passive skill tree. So if you're playing the Sentinel, you'll have the Sentinel skill tree, and then you have the 3 Masteries as well. So you have a skill tree for your Paladin, Void Knight, and Forge Guard. So each class has 4 passive skill trees. And it's absolutely wild because when you start out with your base class, we'll just use Sentinel since that's what we used in this example. So if you start out as a Sentinel, you progress, and once you get to a certain point in the story, you can unlock your Mastery. Now, the second half of that Mastery tree, so let's say you're playing the Sentinel, and you decide you want to be a Paladin. So think about it this way. All the Mastery passive trees are broken in 2 parts. The first half you can use without having to specialize into. The second half of the skill tree, however, you have to be that Mastery to be able to put points into that part of the passive skill tree. Also, when you pick your Mastery, you're going to get an exclusive skill and a bunch of passive skills tied to it as well. So picking your Mastery is really a huge part and important part of the game as well. There's so many different options on the passive skill tree. Currently on my Shaman right now, I'm kind of mixing a little bit from Druid and Beastmaster so I can have some survival aspects. And then even though I kind of feel like I should put it all into Shaman since I am a Shaman technically with that Primalist. Yeah, I don't know. Still a work in progress, but it's crazy, man. And I even had a dream about the passive skill tree last night. Like, that doesn't happen with a lot of games for me. It's absolutely wild. So you have your skill trees that you can level up to 20. You have your passive skill trees, and you also have itemizations and like gear slots like you would expect in any action RPG. It's a little bit unique in Last Epoch because you have, your normal gear, your helmet, ammo, 2 rings, chest piece, gloves, boots, and relic slot, belt. I might have missed one there. And then you also have idle slots. Now, when you very first start, all these will be locked, and as you progress through the story, you'll unlock these slots that you can put idols into. And idols can be game-changing. My only complaint currently with idols is some of them are so niche that they really cater to certain builds. So like this is my problem with it, is some of the builds that I want to do, I don't have idols that really bring anything special to that build, and so I feel a little bit limited in that way. But it's still not a deal breaker, and it adds a lot of customization and just more choices that you can make. The last part when it comes to customization is the item affixes and crafting. It's a huge part of the game, and we're just going to keep it laser focused here just so you can get a quick overview. Every item in the game can have up to 4 affixes on the item. You can have 2 prefixes and 2 suffixes on each item. The prefixes tend to be offensive stats, and the suffixes tend to be where you get your defensive stats, your health, your resistances, armors, all that stuff. So remember when I talked about how there's so many different skills, but we only have 5 skill slots, and so it's kind of a hard choice to decide. It's kind of the same over when we're talking about items and affixes, because you only have 11 item slots. And yeah, that's a lot. Now, each item can have 4 affixes on it, so that's 44 affixes. But you can only have 22 prefixes and 22 suffixes. And there's over 1,000 different affixes in the game. So you can kind of see how that still is a pretty significant choice that you have to make. What stats you want to get, and certain item slots can only get certain affixes. For example, my gloves, I think it's gloves and melee weapon is the only way I can get any melee leech, which is part of my defensive plan for the build I'm working on. But, so then that locks out those two affixes on those two items. And then I have, the more slots on there. It really is like just a giant puzzle in a way. So it really adds a lot to really having to make that choice of your stat priorities and what stats you want to try to get on gear. And yeah, there's crafting in the game, but really Last Epoch is very dependent on loot drops. Okay. So crafting in most games, you would think, okay, I'm going to take this base item and I'm just going to add to it and improve it and make it better and craft this item. You can do that on Last Epoch. You can totally do that. But the way that crafting works on Last Epoch is you have what's called instability. Each time that you craft on an item, you gain 5 instability. And instability is partly factored into your fracture chance to break an item. Once you break an item, you can't craft on it anymore. So if you think about that, if you get, just a base item and you craft on it, 5 times, there's a 25% chance you're going to fracture, minimum. And then, when it fractures, you can't craft on it anymore. That's why it's better to find an item that dropped when you were out killing monsters that already has part of the stats that you want, so then you can craft upon that. I love it because it makes loot drops really matter. So really quick, when it comes to crafting, there's quite a bit to it. We're just going to get just real quick overview here. You have each item can have the 4 affixes, and each affix can be crafted up to tier 5. The higher the tier, the better the stat. There is tier 6 and 7, but those are exalted items. You can only find tier 6 and 7 affixes as item drops. And you can still craft on those items, you just can't touch those tier 6 and 7 affixes. But when it comes to crafting on an item that you've found or you want to improve a little bit, you can go through each of the 4 affixes and choose which one you want to plus up. The lower the tier, the higher chance you have to not fracture the item. And then if there's any empty slots, you can also add on affixes using this interface as well. Within the crafting UI, you also have glyphs. You have one glyph that will lower the stability gained each time you craft, and it has a chance to do so. And then you also have a glyph that will protect the item and have a higher chance of not fracturing the item. It kind of just, it's the glyph of the guardian. It guards your item in a way. And then you also have different runes. There's one that can reroll the implicit stats, which is the base stat of your item. Because that's another cool thing is in Last Epoch, every item has its own base stats. Like for my minion build, I know I want turquoise jewelry because that gives me minion damage. And there's just different items like that, so you kind of know what you're looking for your base item. And then over on the runes, yeah, you have the one that can roll that implicit stat. You have one that can remove a random affix. You have one that re-rolls the affixes on the current item. And a shatter rune. You also have a rune that will destroy the item and have a chance of getting all of the affixes on there and using those as materials for future crafts. Because in order to even craft, and I probably should have said this at the beginning of the crafting section, is you find crafting fragments. They're called affix shards, and you find them while you're out killing stuff, basically as drops. And these are your crafting materials, and you have to have them to craft. And then the last rune you have is one that cleanses the affixes off the item. So there's really, it seems like a lot here when it comes to crafting, and there really is. And there's a little bit of skill involved too, of knowing when to use what type of glyph, what type of rune, when to do, there's a lot to it. And then also got to think about the stat priority that I mentioned earlier as well. I hope you're enjoying this Last Epoch State of the Game video. I know I'm having a blast talking about it, and it's really felt great being back on Last Epoch. If you're enjoying the video, please consider hitting that like button. That'd be awesome. So up to this point, we've talked about Last Epoch, what it is, the different classes that the game has to offer, and I've talked a lot about character customization. If you didn't know, character customization is my favorite part of Last Epoch. Last Epoch does offer everything else that you would expect from a hack and slash action RPG looter type of game, such as your combat, gameplay, story, and endgame. Now, here's the thing. Last Epoch handles character customization exceptionally well. It's definitely one of the highest points of the game. In terms of your story and campaign, the combat and gameplay, and the endgame, they're all there, and they're good. Now, I'm not going to stand here and tell you they're super awesome or anything totally new or anything you haven't seen before. If you've played any other action RPG, it's really, there's nothing new here to see. The campaign is fun. I don't know much about the story. All I can really talk about is the different biomes and monsters that you fight, which there is quite a variety, but after you've done it a few times, it's like any other action RPG where just get through it so you can get to the end game type of deal. The combat and gameplay, I don't know, there's something with the combat, like it's not bad. The combat's not bad. It's just not super amazing either. It still needs work and polish. At the end of the day, it is an indie game that is in early access and is getting updates and is getting polish and those quality updates that I personally want. So as it is right now, combat is good. It's fun. Sometimes while you're moving through the map, you'll randomly clip like an edge of the map and then you're reminded, oh yeah, okay, it's not totally done yet. Super minor things that I think a year from now, I can stand here and tell you the combat is amazing. As it is right now, it's good. It's not amazing. The end game on Last Epoch has really two different parts to it. You have the Monolith of Time, which is basically just endless maps. Like if you've played Path of Exile or anything like that, it's just maps that get increased modifiers, increased difficulties. There is more to the end game than that. I don't really want to go super in depth here since the video is already longer than I wanted it to be. But yeah, the end game, if you like kind of that repetitive, endless maps, increasing challenge, increasing rewards type of end game, which is pretty honestly every end game on any action RPG, you'll feel right at home here. They have improved the end game drastically. There's loads of really cool bosses. You can even target farm for specific item types. They've done a lot of great things to the end game. Totally worth checking out. So that's the first part of the end game. The second part is your arena. And it sounds pretty cool. And it's just an endless arena. Arena waves. And arena waves is how you place on the leaderboard. This is the competitive aspect of Last Epoch, is who can play the longest without dying, essentially. The way that you gain access to the arena is by getting arena keys from the Monolith of Time. I personally have never been a huge fan of the arena in Last Epoch. I find it to be a little bit boring, but it is fun to have those leaderboards and to really kind of push your build to the test in those arenas. So I am, like I said, I'm working on my shaman build. I want to get to at least level 90 so we can start to get some more of those exalted items and see what we can do with the build. Hopefully I'll get the build guide out at some point before Diablo 2 Resurrected. That's kind of my goal anyway. That's going to wrap it up for this Last Epoch State of the Game video 2021. I hope you enjoyed it. I apologize it was way longer than I wanted it to be. I was honestly hoping to have it under like 6-7 minutes, but I don't know how long it'll be by the time we get it out to you. Hopefully you enjoyed the video though. And if you watched to this point, thank you. I know it's been quite a while since I posted a video here on YouTube. I've been feeling real crummy, but it's great to be back at it, man. It's craziness. It's craziness to think that from 2019 till now, I'm even at this point and I'm still even making videos. It's all thanks to you guys. You all are awesome. We'll see you, DMGCREW, on the next live stream or video. Don't forget to subscribe and all that stuff. Chat with you very soon. Peace.